I'm not sure. Oh. All right, good afternoon. Good afternoon. Welcome to Innovate BC. We're looking forward to today's webinar. So glad you could join us. As we welcome you, we also welcome a new season, fall. We said goodbye to summer and fall is here, a new season. So we welcome a new season, new possibilities. Maybe it's letting go. Maybe it's opening up a new chapter in your life. Whatever it is with this season, we just want to give thanks to Creator for the gift of life, the gift of being able to be in community, the gift to walk our path, to honor ourselves, to honor those around us, and to honor land. So we give thanks to Creator. Always important to shout out, when that sun rises in the east, that's Creator meeting us for another day. So we give thanks for this moment. So welcome to this beautiful virtual community that we have created with Cando. It's a good opportunity just to learn, to listen, and also to lend your voice to this conversation, lend a story, experience, maybe you have some questions. So all of that is welcome here. So we're glad you are joining us this afternoon. And for those who are watching on the replay, we are glad you are here as well. So my name is Michelle. I am joining from Amiskwichi, Waskahigan, Treaty 6 Territory, Edmonton. I really love our day today. It's gorgeous outside. We got beautiful weather. The leaves are starting to change. The sun is out. So I hope wherever you are, that you are able to notice that beauty all around. And we just had the full moon. So grandmother moon was just in her most brilliance in the last couple of nights. So go check her out tonight. Go take a walk underneath that moon and feel that good energy. All right, so today's conversation is a discussion on challenges and opportunities for renewables in legacy diesel-based remote communities. So our two guest speakers, Stephen Wilson and Dr. Armand. So welcome both of you. We're really honored that you carved out a chunk of your busy lives to just lend some of your knowledge around this clean energy topic. So welcome. So our guest speaker, let me introduce Stephen, just a little tidbits about him. He's experienced in sales, business development, and operations, always looking to add a positive contribution to all stakeholders. Stephen brings high-level thinking and a broad base of experience. He graduated from the Sauder School of Business with a Bachelor in Commerce. So starting his career at an event marketing company, he moved into fashion, very awesome, before finding his passion for electronics. So having worked with startups in the LED lighting space to a global community in power conversion, Stephen has worked in teams both small and large to raise financing, launch products, drive volume, and deliver on complex custom sales. He's responsible for delivering the value of our flagship accelerator programs in EIR and mentor networks to the clean tech ventures Foresight supports. Woo, that's a lot. He's got a lot behind his belt. That's awesome. So he is the VP Acceleration with Foresight, Canada's clean tech ecosystem. In this role, he oversees Foresight's flagship accelerator programs and manages a network of executives in residence and mentors. Wow. So he brings a lot of good knowledge, experience to the table. And our Dr. Armand is the founder and CEO at iTune Power. So he received his Bachelor of Science degree from Isfahan. I am so sorry. I know you will correct me, after University of Technology in Iran in 2007. He also has a degree from the Iran University of Science and Technology, a PhD degree from the University of Toronto in 2020 in electrical engineering. He is the recipient of multiple provincial and federal academic awards. Amazing, amazing. So including Ontario Graduate Scholarship and Queen Elizabeth II Graduate Scholarship in Science and Technology, and has multiple publications in peer-reviewed journals. So during his doctorate program, Dr. Armand received an IA-based technology over a software platform, which dramatically increases penetration level of renewable energies and reduces frequency of power outages in electrical energy systems. In March 2021, he founded his company, iTunes Power Incorporated, to commercialize the technology. So we're gonna be educated this afternoon, I feel. So the webinar today is a look at a case study from Northern Ontario that overcame traditional barriers to adoption for renewable power in 4 distinctive remote communities, the benefits and a discussion on how this could scale to other areas. I'm going to say no more. I feel like these gentlemen have a lot to speak on and to share. So thank you for coming to share your knowledge. We welcome you. I pass the virtual mic over to you.
Thank you very much, Michelle. And I don't know about you, but the second guy sounds so much more interesting than the first. All those awards, Armand, that's amazing. And
no. You're too humble, Stephen. That's all.
For my sake, I think I just need to shorten my bio up. You know, Michelle, you went through the whole thing. That was fantastic. Really quickly, though, this is going to be a little bit of competition between the business school and the scientific or applied sciences. So we obviously in business school get taught how to use PowerPoint. Armand is going to be running the PowerPoint for us today. So hopefully that runs smoothly. And I'm going to kick that off with next slide, Armand. All right, well, I think we've covered the introductions here quite well. I'm going to talk a little bit about what Foresight is and what Foresight does, and hopefully you'll leave here with an idea of how you might be able to leverage what it is we do for your benefit. And then we're going to jump into Armand telling us about the case study of that he did his research and PhD on, and that application in the technology. And then I'm going to ask him some questions. We're going to discuss that a little bit, and of course, we'll have time for your questions. This is a small, intimate group. If you want to keep your cameras off, that's totally fine. Feel free to jump in the chat if you have any questions. If you want, unmute yourself and dive in. This is really for your benefit. It's not so that I can hear myself talk. I'm actually super interested in hearing Armand talk, but definitely not myself. With that, I'm going to move on to the next slide. Okay, what is Foresight? We have the simple mission of accelerating the impact of clean tech ecosystems in Canada. That takes on a couple different looks. Obviously, we work to support the clean tech community so that innovators who are Canadian in growing their businesses is taking their technology and turning it into a commercializable product that you could possibly buy. But it also means that we work with industries, communities to take the clean tech, wherever it comes from, Canadian or abroad, that's the best in the world that serves their needs so that they can increase the impact of clean tech for them. So we work kind of with both sides and across the ecosystem. Next slide, please. So how do we do that? We work to break down silos. We've kind of identified 5 silos. We call them the Helix 5. SMEs, your startups, your small to medium enterprises, your big industrial players, your big forest product companies, resource companies, your big power generation companies. Government, right? We need policies and regulations put in place that will allow business models to work. We need investors, right? We need investors both to put money into the startups at early stage, the risky capital, angel investors. We also need banks to see what's been de-risked, to go like, oh yeah, if you put in place a solar farm, it is going to get you 6% ROI. I can lend you the money on that. So you need the money all the way through the whole chain to understand what technology has actually been de-risked. And the last piece is academia. I think there's so many smart people in academia who are working on problems they read about in a research paper and not problems that people are actually having out in the field. So many publications are done every year at universities in Canada, and not enough of that technology migrates to the field, maybe because of a lack of understanding of what was really needed to solve the problems, right? Whenever I talk to researchers and they haven't talked to customers, I doubt that they're going to come up with a solution that's going to work. right? Because they're missing some piece of, actually having walked in the customer's shoes and understanding all the context. So those are the 5 groups we're trying to bring together by breaking down silos. We obviously help companies scale technology. I've talked a little bit about that already. I'm the VP of Acceleration. That's actually my whole job at Foresight. Michelle kind of outlined that, so thank you very much. And then accelerate adoption. That's us working with industry, right? We need them to move quicker. An example of this would be right now we're running with the Canadian Resource Innovation Network, a $25 million competition for the best solutions for low emission fuels and value-added products. In the past, we've run competitions with international companies like Vestas for recyclable wind turbine blades. Apparently they built those things knowing in 10 years they would have to throw out those wind turbine blades. Nobody ever thought that that was a problem until they started taking them all apart and went like, where are we going to put these? So now they're looking for recyclable wind turbine blades. We've worked with Pepsi on some of their water challenges. We've worked with a number of international companies to help them identify Canadian innovators, as well as Canadian industry identify global innovators that'll solve their problems, right, to reduce their impact. Next slide, please. So how do we do those 3 things? Well, we've got our accelerator programs, we've got our innovation challenges that I already kind of talked about in our industry impact. We also do market research. So we'll do this for government, we'll do this for industry partners, we'll do this for our own self-interest to just sort of make sure we know what's available in the marketplace, what's the lowest cost, what's the best way to do it. We can do this very cost effectively. We are a not-for-profit, and so our goal is really to disseminate information. So if there's specific questions that you have, you want answers to, that is something that Foresight can help you with. We do work with strategic partnerships. We're Jonathan, no, is that me? No, teasing. We work with other accelerators across the country to have a pan-Canadian reach. So we've got a number of MOUs with universities and others to provide our programming and make sure we're dealing with the best companies across Canada, as well as supporting them. And finally, cluster building. Again, that Helix 5, we're trying to bring all those folks together and break down some of those silos and get them talking, because I think that's one of the things that'll unlock a lot of the power. Next slide, please. So what's all this come to today? We're actually pretty proud of this one. We have helped companies raise nearly $500 million in financing from the private market. So when I talk about investors, we are helping companies understand how to talk to them and move the needle forward and get the funding for their projects. $230 million in company revenue. So it's not just money going into the startups. The startups are now starting to generate commercial revenues at a quite significant rate. And we expect that this will pick up, right? The investment is usually a leading indicator of success of those companies. $1 billion of economic impact. A lot of that comes through some of those industry challenges I talked about. Lots of SMEs supported, lots of people hired by these companies, lots of regional and global partners, right? We are part of the clean tech ecosystem, and we work with international groups in certain areas around CCUS, around water challenges, so that we can both introduce them to our innovative companies and understand what it is they need and the solutions they're looking for. And 30 open challenges. I gave you some examples of those, but again, we're always looking to open new ones and collaborate with folks. Armin, next slide. All right, here's the part that Michelle mentioned. I was in business development. My background before Foresight is I worked in the energy industry, energy efficiency industry, developing technology for it. And so this is one of the things that I looked at the time. And that was, what are cost-effective solutions that you can have right now that actually pay you money? A lot of times people look at energy efficiency and think that it's going to cost them money. And it's how you look at that, right? If you change out all of your light bulbs to LEDs, this is actually a company I worked for. They were involved in the LED lighting space. You take out all the old fluorescents, you replace them with LED lighting, that has a positive payback period. If you use LED tubes, it's about 2 years. You're going to save enough electricity. And that's at BC hydro rates, like 8 cents a kilowatt hour. If you're talking about using diesel energy, right, up at, I think Armin will later talk about that, at $1 a kilowatt hour, 10 times the price, that's going to pay for itself in months. You're going to change out those incandescent light bulbs for LEDs. You're going to change out fluorescents for LEDs, and it's going to pay back in the same fiscal year. Right? And so that's what this graph, that's the story of this graph. Everything on the left-hand side with a negative payback period, that's actually a wise investment decision. So lighting, I mentioned, is really, really quick. right? So this is measured, this is a wonderful graph from a European agency. It's measured in euros per ton of carbon dioxide avoided, right? So they're looking at the carbon emissions of this, right? But you can think of this as well in the dollars that it's going to pay you to make that change. So there's all the things on the left-hand side of the graph, which is lighting, which is insulation. Sometimes you get into buildings and you look at fenestration, which is a fancy word for windows and doors. I don't know why they need that word, but they do. And those ones start to have about a 10-year payback period, a 15-year payback period. That's a little bit hard to get behind, but if you are doing renovations, increasing the insulation makes an insane amount of sense. And the more insulation, the better, right? There's obviously, we're moving towards, in British Columbia, more familiar with the STEP code and eventually passive houses by 2040. But that technology exists today, and it will have a reasonable payback period and a really good payback period if you're shipping that energy in and you're using diesel power. So those are some of the things that, before you even get into, should you be switching off your diesel power, what are you doing to reduce the amount of power that you sort of need in the community in terms of electricity, right? What are you looking at for your lighting? What are you doing for your heating? When you're looking at heating, if you're using electric baseboard heaters, can you get away with heat pumps? There are obviously air source heat pumps that don't work so well in some northern remote communities because of the lowest temperatures available, but you can do ground source heat pumps. So if you are building new structures, can you put in a ground source heat pump? If you're looking at building new structures, can you look at something called an earth tube or an earth battery that'll actually warm, make up air using the temperature in the soil, right? If you go down, 5 feet, the temperature, the ground is actually never frozen. It's always a nice 5 degrees Celsius. So you take a lot less energy to heat it versus the air that's coming in. So those are a lot of those sort of, I call them low hanging fruit. There's technology that exists today, and there's a wonderful quote by John Kerry. He's actually working from the IEA, International Energy Agency, when he says 50% of the technology we need to hit net zero by 2050 has not yet been invented. That's a wonderful little paper there. And we're working with those innovators all the time, and Armin is one of those innovators trying to bring to market those solutions that haven't been commercialized yet. But 50% of them exist. It's LED light bulbs. It's better insulation. It's cellulosic insulation with no carbon footprint. It's heat pumps. It's different choices like that. So I want to start off by saying there's a number of choices that you can make right off the bat to reduce some of those costs. And whenever I talk about energy efficiency, that's one of the things I like to highlight. Armin, with that, I'm going to turn it over to you on what you can do to get from, if this thing gets you from 100 down to 80, how do you remove the rest of the 80% of that carbon footprint? How do you reduce the rest of that 80% of the costs?
Sure thing. We are optimistic to do that. And first of all, I'm really thrilled about the nice things that both Michelle and Stefan mentioned. Thank you so much. I am super thrilled right now. It's a pleasure, everyone, to be here. My name is Arman again. What I'm going to present right now is the core of my PhD research, 7 years of PhD research at University of Toronto. And it's about modernization and decarbonization of First Nation communities' electrical energy systems. How we did that. I'm going to show you the value proposition of our technology. And I promise I'm going to mention in general terms. I'm not going to get technical, so it won't be boring for you. Okay, what is the problem really? We have about 2 million of First Nation communities all across Canada. But did you know that still 79% of them are getting energy from diesel? So is that a good or a bad thing? Cost of diesel is 10 to 15 times higher than provincial power. Based on one resource that I have, cost of provincial electricity is around 12 cents per kilowatt hour. And Stefan, I know you're waiting for this. Cost of diesel is 1.14. It's 114 cents per kilowatt hour. And now 80% of them are getting this exorbitant source of supply. So you might gonna ask, government gonna pay for the diesel, what's the issue? Of course, if you have expensive electricity, there is no economy development. Nobody gonna invest in your community, neither private nor public sector, because any industry, electricity is the backbone of their development. So having said that, what is the long-term solution? We have many of crown corporations all across Canada who are working on decarbonization of First Nation communities. But first question, When is this going to happen? How long does it take for them to bring the provincial power to First Nation communities? That is question number one. We know we are talking about harsh geographical conditions, and we are talking about paths which are not smooth, and they have to build transmission lines to bring the provincial power to those areas. Second point, it's not still free. They're going to charge you. We are talking about 12 cents per kilowatt hour, which is optimistic. And I believe given the cost of commissioning those projects, which are long-term, the cost is going to be higher. And finally, let's say they bring the power, but they have power outage. Now, do you want to switch back to the diesel? We are going back to our problem, right? What would be the short-term and more viable solution? We have extensive amount of natural energy in First Nation communities. And if we can harness that energy, which means the energy that is coming from solar, from wind, first of all, this is free source of energy. You don't have to pay God for sun or for wind. Second point, you're going to be fully decarbonized. And more interestingly, you can sell the excess of energy that you have either to adjacent First Nation communities or back to the grid when the connection is realized with the provincial grid. But I may talk too promising right now. Harnessing that energy is not trivial. The reason is that renewable energies are intermittent. Intermittency means that sometimes you have sunny condition, sometimes you have cloudy condition. The pattern of wind is not predictable, particularly in Canada. So to resolve the intermittency, which means you want to provide a stable and smooth power to your customers, you have to use fast dispatchable sources of energy, which are energy storage systems. But this means that you have to have some kind of a brain that detects whether sun is out there, wind is blowing or not. When should I use the storage system to cancel out the fluctuations of power that is coming from the renewable, so I give a clean and reliable source of energy to my customers? So the challenge would be how to design this brain, which is going to receive information from First Nation communities and going to make decision how to provide coordination between renewable energies and energy storage systems. Now, I want to quantify a little bit why this brain is something that cannot be developed in a trivial manner. Let's say I lose solar in one region. So this means I have shortage of energy and I should discharge my battery to compensate for the shortage. What if my battery hits its limit? It is fully discharged. So I have to kind of coordinate my wind power plant to charge back my battery within the safe range. What if something opposite gonna happen in another First Nation community that I have, and I have excess of wind blowing in that area? So again, I'm using battery to take that surplus of power. But what if again my battery hits its operation range? Now I should play with my solar unit to discharge the battery and return its state of charge. It's a fancy term, which means like the charge level of the battery is within the range. So you see, we should make decision based on the operating condition of the system. What should be the commands or decisions that are coming from that brain, which should provide coordination for our system? So again, why it's not easy to design that brain? Let me do some maths here. Let's say for this fairly simple system where we have 3 First Nation communities, so I have 9 renewable energy and energy storage systems, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And I assume a simple 3 condition per each energy resource. The collective operation of these 9 resources will result in literally 20,000 possible scenarios that can happen in this system. And that brain should have a decision enabled subsequent to each of these 20,000 scenarios. It's not the end of the story. Those resources are limited in terms of capacity. So if you have more populations, which is happening with First Nation communities, you need to plug in new sources of energy to that system. Guess what? With addition of more resources, the number of scenarios will exponentially increase. From 20,000, if you want to plug in one more battery, you're going to jump to 60,000 scenarios. So if I want to design that brain by grabbing a pen and paper and write down a decision-making algorithm, it should take like months or years. And if I design one algorithm for 20,000 scenarios, when I jump to 60,000 scenarios, I should do everything from scratch. So conclusion, that brain cannot be developed over a human or ad hoc based approach. What we did, for the very first time, we use artificial intelligence to design these fancy pictures, but all they do is that they are developed over a systematic approach. We do not develop them. We just input our system model into a proprietary algorithm that we have, and eventually this brain guarantees to cover up to millions of scenarios that can happen in those First Nation communities. And we also guarantee to have minimum costs or minimum adjustment on the legacy sources of energy, which are diesel in those communities. So the value proposition of our technology is that those decision-making algorithms, which should really cover up to millions of scenarios that can happen for a fully decarbonized First Nation community, we guarantee to cover all of them. And this is the very first time that artificial intelligence is used within the context of the application that I mentioned. Finally, we did a case study to show that our, I would say, artificial brain, which is really powerful, gonna work. What we did, we talked to 4 First Nation communities in Northwest of Ontario. They are connected to 2 main points, which are near Red Lake and Pickle Lake in Ontario. What we did, we operated 4 First Nation communities as what we call microgrid. What microgrid means is that you have like a small circle, like what you see here. All it matters is that it has autonomy of operation from the rest of the power system. What does that mean, autonomy? It's a fancy word again. Okay, it is important to have autonomy of operation. Do you remember I said if we bring provincial power to the First Nation communities and the provincial power gonna have outage condition, what's gonna happen to First Nation communities? With our technology and with using renewable energy, let's assume we have 4 First Nation communities as 4 microgrids. If we lose the connection from the grid, the provincial grid, to those 4 First Nation communities, we can make sure that our First Nation people not even going to notice that that disconnection happened. We are going to provide continuous supply of energy for them. Not only that, each individual community may also going to lose their connection from the rest of the system. Let's say this MG1, which means microgrid 1, going to lose its connection. We can still operate it as a single microgrid system or a single autonomous First Nation community, and we can operate the 3 remaining communities as a 3 microgrid system. And last but not least, with our technology, we can do energy arbitrage with adjacent First Nation communities or with the provincial power. And final point, we did collaboration with a German renowned company called Phoenix Contact. They're really famous in power system. We used their state-of-the-art hardware called PLC Next. We implemented our brain on that hardware platform. And for sure, we do not have the luxury to plug in that hardware right into a physical system, because if it doesn't work at the first attempt, there are lots of like penalties associated with that. So what we did, we worked with a very also famous company in Manitoba called Real-Time Digital Simulator, or RTDS. All they do, they can accurately simulate a real First Nation community power system in real time, but virtually. So we distributed those 4 First Nation communities over these pictures that you see. These are real-time simulators, and we showed that we can cover up to 1 million possible scenarios that can happen in those 4 First Nation communities. And we up to 100% were able to decarbonize those systems and provide autonomy of operation for them and energy arbitrage, which gonna make profit for those communities. So they can make profit for their people. They can have a revenue stream by selling energy to adjacent First Nation communities. And last point, if this technology can be realized, it's going to bring up many career opportunities, because for sure there should be maintenance provided for the renewable energies. Those decision-making algorithms that we have there should be centers structured and constructed for real-time monitoring and making sure that those dispatching of renewable energy is conducted properly. I hope I didn't get too technical. I did my best. I really apologize. I did my defense a couple of months ago, so it's a force of habit.
No problem, Armin. Thank you so much for laying that out, and as well the case study. The first question I have is kind of on the cost of that, right? Because these microgrids don't exist today. Each of those remote communities has its own diesel generator and is getting delivered its own. So you would need to run the wires between those communities.
Yeah.
There's some heavy upfront costs to implement this system.
That's a good question. If you want to, let's say, install a fairly average sized renewable energy like solar and wind power plant in a community, we're talking about $5 to $10 million. And that upfront cost is out there. But government is shifting towards initiating programs which are going to provide the funding requirement for installation of those renewable energies and actually dramatically changing the energy infrastructure in those communities. And I did a study on the rate of return. If you have that cost on the asset, given the 15 times higher cost that diesel has compared to provincial power. And remember, we're talking about free source of energy here. We are looking at a term of 4 years to 5 years to have 100% rate of return on the asset.
Okay. And do you reduce the size? And I mean, because if I was in a remote community, and I'll pick on Northern Ontario, but Northern BC, or none of it, I think someone was talking about none of it. My concern would be, I know diesel works. When it's minus 40 outside, right?
Yeah.
You want there to be power 100% of the time. And so when you're looking at moving to a fully renewable solution, are you oversizing that system out of concern for it not working? And because of your algorithms and because of the calculations you're able to do, you can make the package that they buy a little bit smaller? Guarantee them, like, we know at minus 40, here's how it's going to work. And because we're putting because we're connecting you to in a microgrid to possibly some other communities, you get that safety of having a larger fleet of renewables available. Like, what's the benefit to doing versus just buying, like, extra solar panels, extra wind turbines, and extra batteries?
Sure. Great question. Couple of points that were triggered. Number one is that I think it's worth mentioning that the general perception is that if you are talking about low temperature solar unit is not efficient anymore. It's the opposite. If you have a very low temperature sunny condition, which is the case in Toronto, the efficiency of solar units gonna actually increase, because when the temperature is low, there are some technical studies on that, you're gonna have a more efficient solar. It's not the case with wind power plant, I agree, but with solar, lower temperature is actually better. And raining is also good for solar. You know what? Because if you don't have rain, dust gonna collect on your solar panels, and rain can wash that out. So
snow doesn't help.
For snow, there is a technique to melt the snow. Actually, they do something. But getting back to your main question, yes, for diesel, they usually over-design diesel units for these communities, because diesel is really low in terms of efficiency, the term that I know is very important. With our technology, I would say the beauty of our technology is the energy arbitrage. You see, even if you over-design your system, and you have surplus of power at any time, you have the possibility to sell it to your adjacent, like First Nation communities, or to the grid. And also because we provide a very dynamic algorithm, which is very fast in terms of response, if you have a 10 to 15% safety margin from your load level, you can still keep the system operational. For diesel, we are talking about 40%. And the reason is that diesel has these rotating parts, which are going to add to the inertia of the system. But with renewable, it's the opposite. We don't have any rotating part. We have like what we call converter. So that safety margin going to reduce dramatically.
There's a question from Jade. What is the size of the First Nation community that you used in this case study?
Sure.
I guess there's a bunch of them. So
yeah.
I don't know if there's an average size. Or...
Yeah, the average was 7 megawatt in terms of energy consumption. I was looking at 10. One of them was roughly 10 megawatt. The other three were between 3, 6, and 8 megawatt. So I would say the average was sitting at 7 megawatt.
Okay. And Jay, was that the kind of the size of the current diesel generation capacity you were looking for, or were you looking for in numbers of people?
Sorry, can you rephrase the?
I was asking Jade whether that answered
okay.
the question. Numbers of people. Do you know how big the communities were in numbers of people by any chance, and not the size of the people?
Yeah, it was the 20,000. Like the one that was 10 megawatt, that was feeding 20,000 people in that community.
So fairly large community.
Yep.
Fantastic. Does your equipment work? Because I know, solar is great, wind is great. We've got actually different options across the country. And I know in Alberta, there's certainly some folks in Saskatchewan as well looking at geothermal projects and the opportunities around that. I know that actually there's one company I know, Borealis Power, looking at southeastern BC for geothermal projects. Does that change the equation of what you would do in these cases? Because geothermal is much more dependable than a wind or solar plant. Do you still kind of need that backup and some computational power, or you still need lots of battery backup for the geothermal projects?
Great question. For sure, we have to redesign our algorithm because the information that we are going to receive from geothermal, for example, going to be different than solar. But if we know the behavior of those systems, we can again generate a new algorithm with the same properties. That is important. We can again guarantee to cover all possible scenarios that can happen between those energy resources. So I would say we look at those small energy resources as black boxes. As long as we know their characteristics and their performance behavior, we can guarantee to generate a new algorithm with the same features and performance and functionalities.
And what's sort of the other option besides using yours? I mean, because there's lots and lots of scenarios, but everyone cares about the worst one. You're sort of saying, well, it's minus 40. The solar panels are actually operating more efficiently, but I'm guessing people are heating things more as well if they're using electric heat, if they're not getting, heating oil or propane or diesel delivered anymore. So otherwise the engineers would just look at the worst case scenario and design a system for that. And you're sort of saying you can optimize that design point?
Sure, that's also a good question. I want to highlight a very fundamental issue that exists with power system. The worst case scenario is actually not about energy optimization. It's about losing connection from the source of energy. So this is something we call resiliency, like the one that I showed here. This is the worst case scenario when you lose the connection. And if you can maintain the continuity of operation and don't care about the cost of energy production here, but maintaining the system operational, that will give you enough time to do energy optimization on the system. When people talk about energy optimization, they really forget that they first should keep the system operational to have enough time to optimize the energy management. But we did our technology for both maintaining the resiliency of the system, which we refer to as power management, power means in short time frame. And we also considered a given stable condition, and we did energy optimization on that.
Okay, excellent. I actually have a question for Connie. Connie, I know you're joining us today, and I believe you said you were looking at moving to a renewable power solution in an Innovate community.
Yeah, we're actually working on an Indigenous off-diesel initiative. So it's actually to help the community reduce their reliance on diesel. I don't know if there's ever an option to totally eliminate diesel in Nunavut, but certainly the concept or idea is to reduce the dependence on diesel and also greenhouse gas emissions.
And what, I mean, what are kind of your concerns around, or what are the challenges you're facing as you look to implement that project?
Challenges are community capacity, actually having the educated experts in the communities. Yeah, I don't know what else to tell you. Yeah, and I mean, just actually keeping the project moving forward. Actually, my part in the project is helping the community write their community energy plan. So it's just well, we're gonna start small. What are some of the changes that the communities can make? Even per home. By installing some eco-fit systems, kits to change the LED lighting, like you mentioned, and reducing water consumption. So just like a number of smaller changes that the community can make to, just reduce the diesel consumption up there.
I actually have a quick question for Connie, if I'm pronouncing your name correctly.
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay, yeah, so because we are talking more about like a dramatic change in the infrastructure of diesel-based communities, rather than focusing on the residential level, we're looking at more wide area operation. How would you describe the main decision makers who want to say whether I have a green flag to go with like replacement of diesel? Because that is like a vague point for me right now. I don't know whether government is the decision maker or the communities themselves are the decision makers.
I would say that it would be all, and also Kulik Energy Corporation. Like the energy company has a monopoly in Nunavut, but it's it's all parties.
All parties. Okay, that makes the work to be harder, but yeah, that's the way it is.
Yeah.
Okay.
So and Connie sort of said the local expertise for some of those is that, and you're looking at energy efficiency upgrades or some retrofits, right? Some LED lights, the low flow shower heads, the I call it low hanging fruit of energy efficiency, and larger projects where you would be implementing community solar. That's where you run into that challenge of a lack of local expertise to install and maintain.
Exactly. The other challenge that we have too, so I was involved with a solar installation project in Johaven. I lived up there a year and a half ago, or no, a couple of years ago now. The other challenge is we're limited to 10 kilowatt hours by Kulik Energy, and it's net metering at the moment. So there are options for larger projects to implement a CIPP with QEC, but at the moment we're restricted to the size of solar installations.
Right. Yeah. They I guess have their issues with too much power flowing back into their grid, right?
Right.
Oh, okay. If you don't mind, I can jump in here. Great point, Connie. Actually, what we can do, we can install a storage system at the point of connection from, let's say, the lower level, in terms of a hierarchy, lower level customers. So if they have surplus of power, that would not kick them back because they cannot stop that from going to the upstream grid. And we can charge those batteries which are connected at the point of connection. You know, so you can increase your depth of penetration, I would say, because net metering can limit you in terms of the capacity that you can install, but we can use the storage to push that capacity further.
Have you looked at grid scale energy storage, batteries, or anything in that realm?
No, no, not really, because well, yeah, I guess we just don't know enough about it yet. I don't know about the functioning of the batteries at those temperatures. Yeah, I don't, I mean, even with solar, it's just like, you know, you have 24-hour daylight in the summer, you know, none in the winter. Yeah, how would the battery storage work? It's, yeah, good question.
I mean,
Yeah.
is that why in your drawing you put solar and wind? Because when one's working, the other's not?
Oh, for my, you mean for my case?
Yeah, I noticed that in your drawings that you've got both wind and solar. And I'd assumed that that's because sometimes it's cloudy, but the wind is blowing. I'm in
That's
Vancouver.
right.
That's what happens half the year.
Yeah, they have a complementary behavior, I would say, which is good. Like if you lose one, you have the other one. And another point is, I know that another challenge First Nation communities have is about the time they want to buy diesel over the year. Sometimes diesel is more expensive, sometimes it's less expensive, and government does not provide diesel on a daily basis. It's 2 or 3 times per year. So what we're also thinking about is to use the storage to charge them when the diesel cost is low and have the battery ready. So if the diesel price is going to go up, you use the battery to feed your community rather than burning diesel. So I would say storage is like the key component here to give you flexibility in terms of power flow that you can have in the system.
And I'll say, Armin, you probably have a tangential knowledge of the battery space, but if long-term energy storage is something that's really interesting to this conversation, it's certainly something I know some other Foresight companies are looking at. I was on a call with somebody yesterday who was actually looking at compressed air for long duration energy storage as an alternative to batteries, because I think the way he said it is the ground is free. If you have porous structures, which a number of northern communities would around them, you can actually store it. You don't need salt mine caverns. You don't need to drill wells. The good thing about Canada is we have a lot of experience in drilling into the ground.
Yeah.
And so that's what he's leveraging upon to look at that compressed air storage. But there's also great innovations coming out of the US. If you look at Form batteries, I think they recently came out of stealth mode with $1 billion of investment for an iron air battery. So looking at multiple day duration of storing electricity, right? So lithium ions are great for like 1 to 4 hours. As you said, Connie, if it's going to be dark for 24 hours, your solar panels aren't going to come back on. You need to be looking at what you can be doing for, you know, how can you store something from the summertime into the winter time? How can you be looking at charging and doing those sorts of time shifting? And there are some interesting developments there. In the medium term, there's zinc air batteries that are kind of, you know, for lithium ion are great for 1 to 4 hours. Zinc out kind of come into their own around 8 to 24 hours. So, you know, how you store energy is an entire discussion. You're absolutely right. There's lots to look at there, but it starts to, even at lower electricity costs, you know, the sort of 12 cents that he's mentioning in Ontario, the 8 to 10 cents we see here in BC, there start to be business cases around that, as long as your friendly neighborhood power company allows you to let those work. But if you've got net metering, there may be some things there that you can do with energy storage. Armin, what's your sort of look at energy storage and business models for that, separate or in conjunction with renewable generation?
I would say in conjunction, because it's an indispensable component. You need storage to have a overall output which is dispatchable. If you have renewable energy solely out there, you cannot rely on it as a reliable source of power because you have fluctuation. So in terms of the business model, I would say we have two actually streams. We can use the storage to provide power injection to the grid, which means a huge amount of power in a very short duration of time. That is critical if you want to keep the system resiliency. So maintaining its operational, even if you lose the connection from the grid. And sometimes you want to have a slow, smooth injection of energy, which is over a longer time frame. So for each of them, for energy arbitrage, for sure, compressed air storage systems, like they can be of use because they have a high capacity, but you cannot discharge them in a very fast manner of time in a very short time frame. So they have their own application, but battery energy storage system definitely can be a strong candidate for keeping the resiliency of the system. So, and power outage legislations are exorbitant. So if you can use the battery to avoid power outage legislation, the business model is pretty clear out there. We have more than $200 million power outage legislation fines because of power outage legislation in the States since the beginning of 2021. So,
yeah, and I mean that might be different, obviously, jurisdiction. I might actually, I might push you on that one because you sort of talked about, renewables need the batteries. Batteries love renewables because someone's got to make the power. There's actually a company I used to know. I used to talk to them more frequently. They're in Australia, and what they do is they do a power conversion unit and batteries to sit alongside a diesel generator, because I think we all know that internal combustion engines, work better at different RPMs. I think this is a speed gauge for some reason. I don't know why I'm bringing that in. It's like your car, right? It's better at some RPMs than others. And so what they do is they just keep the diesel generator running at the peak efficiency, right? The peak RPMs, and the battery handles the variations. So it's lower than, it doesn't have to rev up where it's not as efficient, doesn't run lower where it's less efficient. When less power is generated, the batteries are charging. When more power is needed, batteries are discharging. The diesel generators work at their peak efficiency. So that actually saves energy, and which ultimately, I mean, we've been talking a lot about energy, and I know we started off talking about greenhouse gases, and I know that that's one of the things we talked about, which is something I care deeply about and I'm very, very interested in. But at the end of the day, at Foresight, we look for business cases that make sense. Armin, you already mentioned, this pays for itself in 4 to 5 years. We want to make sure the technology doesn't just do good by reducing your greenhouse gas emissions, but has a business case, will actually save you money, right? And so there are some options to use batteries and to use power conversion and time shift some of that demand and improve the efficiency.
Yeah, like shaving, yeah.
So
load leveling.
Load leveling and peak shaving. So they were doing that for very small applications, but definitely at the industrial size of a few kilowatts. So there are some options around that to use batteries independent of renewables to reduce the amount of diesel used.
Yeah, definitely. As you mentioned, one application of battery can be to sit out there. So you keep your diesel operational at its maximum, I would say, efficiency, and you don't have to play with the diesel, keep it at that level and use the battery to compensate for the fluctuation of your customer's load. So that would be like another very interesting, I would say, business case where renewable doesn't play any role. Battery is nice. It can play as a complementary guy everywhere, like.
It's a neat technology. So I think we've got 4 minutes left. Michelle, did you want to do a wrap up and introduce any next sessions? I don't want to steal all of your time.
Yeah, thank you, gentlemen, Dr. Armand and Stephen Wilson. Thank you for passing on some of your knowledge. I know when you were talking about the case studies, there was 2 pieces that that got me. It was beneficial to the land, but also beneficial to the community, potentially creating job opportunities. So I love to hear that. We do have a couple of moments left. Does anyone have any questions before we say goodbye? Jade says, thank you very much. It was very informative, very informative.
Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and drop my email in the chat here. If anybody does want to reach out, if they've got any further questions on, I'm sure Armin can share his as
Yeah.
well.
That's great.
On
So
that
there's
specific,
email.
yeah, as I mentioned, Foresight works across a number of technology areas, from water to energy to building efficiency. We've got, depending the size of the communities and the size of buildings, we've got some companies that will provide you AI to run buildings better, to run HVAC better, to do automated efficiency or audits, right? To recommend the most cost-effective solutions. We've got a variety of really neat technologies out there. So if there's any challenges, feel free to reach out to me. Let me know what they are. If any of your groups would like to run a challenge, make a competitive thing, we can run some of them for quite the $25 million one I mentioned with CRIN and the low emission fuels. That's a big challenge. We do small ones for communities around $10,000, where we'll help them find the most innovative solutions for their problems with real world impact. So reach out to us, market research, anything you want, or just if you have a couple questions, I'd be happy to field them for you.
Great.
And I would say, as my closing note, that we have the technology at the market ready, like it's ready to be deployed for field implementation. So if you're interested to have more chat about it, like the opportunities that it can create for your community in more details, you have my email address out there, and we'll be happy to talk to any of you. Awesome. Well, thank you so much. Thank you all for joining us. This is recorded, so if you feel like you need to go back and rewatch, that will be a good opportunity for you. So thank you very much for sharing your knowledge this afternoon. We're entering a new season, and I feel like it's a new season that we need to tap into more. We need to have conversations more. We need to educate ourselves more around this renewable energy. We have to. So thank you for starting this conversation. So thank you all for joining, and may you have a good rest of the day. And also take a moment, appreciate that grandmother moon. She's still all in her glory. So have a good rest of the day, everyone. Thank you so much. Peace. Thank you, everyone.